Good. How are you? How are
Pretty good. I
things,
see
man?
you're in the office, huh?
Yeah, I know.
You just have this glow around your head,
I
Yes,
miss it so much.
we can be virtually anywhere, right?
and your daughter's so still over there, Bill.
I know she's busy climbing that rock climbing wall, but
It's very different from other kids, right?
I can do a fun one though where change change the background a little bit and have her a little bit more active. Where is that one? I have another one it's just kind of fun for her to.
I think the best one is when you have like a lot of people in the room, or like sometimes people have their kids and they do this thing. Choose virtual background. We go to rotate 90. And when there's kids in the room,
Don't fall down.
That's a good one.
I told Tony today, I was like, I'm going to take a picture of you and use that as my background, but I'll move away from the camera. So when I speak, it's Tony.
Perfect.
So if you didn't know, Cheyenne knew if you ever meet Tony one day, people mistaken me as him. That's a good background for that. Okay. Should we just start then?
Yeah. Mail coming. My dogs are going crazy.
Okay. Just to, you guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to start, right? You've learned about the Revit already, the Revit side, the modeling side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was on
And
my
the
page.
reason, right? And the reason why you're here is just to kind of like going back to what our engineering offsite, the theme of it was connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
So now it's like, how do we take the stuff that they generated during sales, and then I'm assuming he kind of briefly explained to you about drafting as well, and these
Yeah.
the come from this, and then connect it all the way down to, let's just say, to the shop.
Yes. To the shop floor.
Okay, so let's give you a little quick overview. Like you already kind of know, like say this is a little wall right here, and then in this wall you have a unit, right?
Yes.
So this one in particular, I'm gonna pick out. It's very simple. It's a unit 96, and then the palette name. These have to do with the shop. You know, they're gonna what palette it belongs to. All right, and then you can see week and day. So week 1, I'm assuming day 1 maybe, if it hasn't been set yet. So meaning, so how the shop works is they break down the whole building into digestible chunks in basically weekly releases, right? So they break down, say maybe for this job, they break down 10 weeks and then how many units they want to assemble each week, right? Or they want to break down how many total weeks, how many units total in the whole building, and then they break it down, work backwards from there. And then they decipher how many weeks they have, okay?
Yeah.
So this is one unit right here, and inside this unit, you have, so think of it as like a window frame, right? It's like a box, right? So you have four sides to it. So you'll have this mullion right here. This has a family. So every unit has, this in the surrounding conditions, you have your head, you have your sill, and then you have your 2 verticals on the side. So that encompasses your basic window frame, right? And inside those, the frame has the window the Revit family, right? That they place in there, right? That's where it starts connecting to the data that's inside the Takeoff program, okay? So let's jump to that. So if you take a look here, okay, let's just say this family is SW755692-001P. So in the start of a project, right, we'll take a look at the server, meaning standard data on the server. We type in this command in AutoCAD. Again, we use AutoCAD to generate a lot of our fat tickets and unit assembly drawings.
Yeah.
So this brings up this little window server standard data. And inside here has all these data that we inputted throughout many years. We're currently in the process of cleaning it up. But you can see it says detail number and it says Revit resource. Now this is very important. This Revit resource is directly connecting to the family that we just showed right here.
Yeah.
Right. So that's your first dot you connect. So you have to take a look at, okay, I have this family that's modeled in there. Do we have data for it?
Yeah.
$56.92. $56.92. Right here. So there's standard data for it. So normally you'll just copy, right? Sorry. And then you just, this is what we call a UD window. Hold on one sec. This is what we call a UD window. So inside this UD window, we input our project-specific data.
Yeah.
So in this case, you know, you'll have the detail number, which is right now the family number, but you're gonna have to change this down the line. Okay, so in the setup stage, you just put in the detail number and then the Revit resource number. So we already have it here, this one, right, has all these data in it. So inside this is what we call it. There's many names to it. This right here, it's called part use. I call it the tag name, tag use, right? So it just generates a tag, which I'll explain a little bit later once I draw the unit out. So inside here, these tag uses, right? You have data built into it. So you see this W755692. That is the part that's like the families use right here.
Yeah.
And any part that's associated within that detail is what we have to input right here. So normally, you know, you might think like, oh, that's a lot of things to input, but it's just you've had to input it once, then copy it down, paste it, and then modify it, then copy it down, paste it, modify it. So this is why it's really important for us to build a standard library. So then when we have jobs like this, we can just take it from the server instead of just constantly rebuilding from scratch, right?
Saves time.
Saves a lot of time. So just a little brief overview of how these work is this is the tag use, which I'll explain a little later. You'll see it visually. It goes from, let's see, Incil ST111 or 119 DT to the same name. So basically what we're trying to do is we try to make these use read rules, meaning like it's conditional. So in, say for instance, this is your sill, right? It's reading from vert to vert, right? In this case, it's just a regular vertical. So anything in between is very typical. But when it gets to the ends of it, it's usually reading like say a jam, right? That you see in a shop drawing. So when it comes to a jam, we'll have another condition for it reading, let's see. Find a sill for you.
So Cheyenne, just a question. Did Gabriel explain to you a little bit on how the data in Revit is set up and the family name, some of the things that Eric's showing you as well?
He said that the data was set up, we talked about how the data was set up on the SQL server, that all the data was located there, but he didn't really go into the specifics regarding the family names and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so the family name is really important. The family name is the thing that connects the Revit data to the data that we set up. So hence this, again, this Revit resource column, right, in the standard data.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me look for it here. So I'm trying to look for it. The sill is a little easier to explain. So we have a sill condition. This is, again, the main tag use name. So this part right here is a sill, okay? So the condition is a vert to vert, meaning it's a vertical to vertical. It's just a regular, typical vertical condition, right?
Yeah.
And then you see right below it, we call it a jam to jam. So just ignore the number now. I don't want to confuse you with the numbers, but just look at the name, right? So jam to jam. So the idea here is to, when we have these typical conditions, you already have a rule set. So it will trigger that rule, right? So that means it will trigger this particular rule, and it'll pop up this using this part number, extruding it using this fab number with this kind of, this is what we call an adjustment. So it's however long you tag your length of your tag, which I'll show you in a bit,
Yeah.
that are adding to it. And then when you get to the jam, right, it will read, say this is our jam right here. It will read that this is a vertical to jam. So it's conditional, right? So now it knows, the program knows to read the left side of your unit is your vertical and the right side of your unit is your jam. So
Okay.
it kind of combines it, right?
I see.
Like the way I usually like to explain it is like I tell people it's kind of like a Lego, right? You're just taking pieces and kind of just consolidating the one to just build what you kind of want.
Yeah.
Okay. So once all that data is set in here, right? Everything is set. Let me delete this so you can have a fresh start. I was testing out before the meeting. So once that's set, normally we would go, say this is the, after metal takeoffs done, or even during metal takeoffs, right? So the step is, once we palletize meaning like we separate the units by week, break it down by how the shop and field wants it, or the field wants it really. We move on to what we have now is a setup stage. We set up all the data for metal takeoff, for material takeoff. And material takeoff, you only get 1 week to do it. So then we have to make it as quick as possible, right? And once that's done, then it goes to fabrication stage. Okay, so it becomes, it siphons through a lot of stages to get that refinement, right? So material takeoffs, we don't really worry about too much about the fabrication right now, in terms of like the notches, the holes and whatnot. We really worry about the length of it, are the right parts being taken off, okay? So let's just skip to the fabrication stage, right? So let's say right here, you're on, you've already done 2 releases and you're on week 3 of the release, meaning like you can see it right here. This is what we call a unit key sheet, right? It has the unit number. This ID number is unique to every single unit drawn, right? So it's like it's for the field to know where to put the unit. This one though, and this never changes. This cannot change. This number is what we call the unit ID, or the unit number, right? This can be similar. So if you just take a look at the shape of it, and then the shape of the unit, right? It's like a cookie cutter. So it's like unit 96, 96, 96, 96, 96. It's repeated, right? And then when you get to the ends of it, usually it's different. So 95, right? It really goes back to how.
Because it's the different, like he said, there's the jam and then there's the vertical.
Correct.
Because those are all the same units, but then the one on the on the end is not the same as the one in the middle.
Correct. Yeah. So usually, just think of it from like looking at a wall, right? The middles are usually pretty stagnant. They're repeated, and then once it gets to the end, then it's the thing that transitions over to something that's different.
Yeah.
And then you'll notice that the key sheet is the same pages as the shop drawings. This is just a layer that we turn on to shut off some of the stuff that we don't need to see when we're really just trying to determine which units occur on these particular elevations. So it's specific for that.
Here, let me show you, open up another session, see if I can show you the shop drawings. While that opens, I'll just keep explaining. So let's just say we decide to do unit 96. That's the first unit I want to do for week 3, right? So you will go in here to the Revit model. Takeoff. Under the WW Takeoff tab, you'll have this this tag right here. You have to UPD it. UPD means update database. So this is the Takeoff program.
Yeah.
Right. This is your Takeoff program. So what it does is once you hit that UPD button, it looks at all the units inside this model with all the Revit family associated with it and everything like that, and it inputs it inside the Takeoff program. Okay. And it just stores it in there until you want to use it. So how you would use it is you want to start doing the unit 96, right? So you hit create tag drawing. Select the output folder for the units. So it's normally just under Takeoff units is where the units are gonna be placed at. And then you'll select the unit that you wanna work on. So in this case, 96. Okay, now it's gonna create the tag drawing. Let's see if,
So this is an example, but Eric, can you select more than one unit at a time during this process?
yes, yes. So you don't have to select one at a time. So that's a good question though. So,
Yeah.
so let's just say I want to create this whole wall. So I want 96, 95, and 97, right? Or even just the bottom. So let's select from 88, 89, 90, and then 95 to 97. 88, 90, 95, 97. So again, create tag drawings. So 88, oh, there's two 88s, that's weird. 88, 89, 90, 90, 96 already drawn, so 97, 95, and 94. Okay. 97, 95, 95, and 97. Okay. So it's complete. Then you just go into the units folder. So in my case, it's in my desktop projects, Matilda A, that's the project we're using. Takeoff, and then units. So you see here how it's drawn, 88, 89, 90, 95, 96, 97. So let's do 96 first. So we always draw our units in CAD. So you see how it's drawn roughly the shape of what you see in Revit, and also the shape in the key sheet as well, right? It's a rough outline. So what you're seeing here is these are the taglines that we're talking about. So inside each of these taglines, right, has data in it. And the data is driven back to here, this database.
That it comes back from that server, from that thing.
Correct, yeah, this thing. This is the UD window, and then there's also kind of the server data that I kind of drew up from. That one doesn't, that produces this database. You have to produce it.
Yeah.
Or they draw it in as well.
Okay.
So as long as, I forgot something, sorry. So when you UPD the Revit model, what it does is it looks it looks all the family that is happening inside the Revit model, and then it looks into the server, right, on the server, and it pulls in the data that's necessary, that's connected, right, and then the ones that you're missing is the one that you either it probably don't. That means it doesn't have any server data. Then you're gonna have to input that manually.
Okay, I see.
Starting to connect the dots a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so if you look here, let's just use this as an example. We're talking about detail 2 on 551 L FS invert. So this is your tag use name. It's very generic. I wonder why it's okay. Sorry, I had to refresh it. So you see how it's detail number? It's not the Revit family anymore. It's actual detail number. So this had to correlate to the shop drawings, and this is what they kind of keyed in, right?
Yeah.
So when you pull it in from the server, it's going to just show you the detail number matching the Revit resource, and then the person who does metal takeoff usually maps it to an actual detail on the shop drawing. Okay. So you see how if you look at here, detail is 2 on 551 at L. I mean semicolon L. So 2 on 551 semicolon L, and then the use names are FS invert 138 and then invert 138.
And it has a when you went back to the drawing, it has the detail number right there next to each tagline or whatever.
Correct. Okay. Here, let me pretty sure we don't need this anymore. So let's open up the actual shop drawings. I thought I had another session open, but didn't let me.
So we'll use the shop drawings to do all of our materials, make sure that what's intended in the details is what we're producing. So we're going to use those not only to map the data, but we're going to use those for references as well. And then we have a whole checking process that goes along with creating the units. We have a separate team of project coordinators that actually goes through and does the checking of the shop drawing details, the mathematical calculations, looking at these from a different reference than just creating the data. We're looking at it from the standpoint of being able to build it and size it, making sure that it works properly.
Yeah.
Right. So using this detail, you see this W75 5692, right? That's one side of the unit, and the other side is the 5691, what we call the male mullion and then the female mullion.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look down on the bottom of the detail, so it's a detail bubble 2 on 551. That's the one that we're referring to, right? So you see it, but below it, you see this family. So that means this detail is using this particular family. The D just stands for detail, but it's usually a P. So in this case, it's using a SW75 5692.001 P in this case. Right, so the same thing, right? SW75 5692.001 P. Right.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, and that family for that unit is using this family, and this family is mapped to this detail, and this detail is on the shop drawing that I just showed you, right? So inside here, you'll notice that, oh, how come the tag name, again, this tag name right here, these two, is very generic. You know, this is to avoid any, you know, like super long tag names, or, you know, you just want to keep it as.
You wouldn't have to copy and paste the whole thing from.
Yeah, like it's too specific. Yeah, you're gonna, like, the way we have it set up now is that you want to take different combinations and minimize the variances, right, in the additions. So you see how these are conditional, right? And this is what we call a rule container. So inside here, you have all these rules. So what it does is it takes this condition, combine it with, say, this condition, right? So your head is usually your head is usually up top, right? And your sill is usually at the bottom. So it takes what's happening in the bottom and combine it with what's happening up top. Okay, and it just generates all these rules. So it's like all these conditional. Like, it's like super long, right? But this, again, this is generated by just making your generic condition here. All right. So again, right here, then you have one on the right side, and then you have one for horizontals, and then your sill, and then your head, right?
Yeah.
This is your glass. It also places in your glass as well. This is your glass tag. So if you click into here, right, this is your glass type that they set inside the Revit model. The bytes are also set. I think Alan, have you met Alan before?
I have not, no.
Okay, so he made this little tool where the glass would recognize all the families around it. Therefore, it will give it a byte. A byte meaning, okay, from a byte is from, this is your glass, right? So from here, this is what we call like a daylight or pocket. And then to here is your byte. So that's this is like a 1-inch byte, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a 1-inch or 7/8 byte. So that's your byte. So what it does is, again, the Revit model knows to read the rules, the Revit family around it, and put in the bytes accordingly. So once you establish that all the data is set, and then you run out your unit, oh, a little side thing here, all these taglines are white, right? That means there's actual data tied to it. If there isn't any data, say if I delete this and I redraw the unit again from Revit, the tagline will be red.
And that's how you know there's no data attached to it.
Correct. It's like it flags you. You're like, oh, something's wrong. It may not be not any data. It's maybe mapped wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Like maybe the way they word the family, Revit resource family, it's wrong. It just has to. There's some error that you have to look into. Okay. So after this is done, we have to again. The Revit model has the UPV command, and it derives from the UPV command on the AutoCAD. So if you run update database, it starts inputting all the data from the UD window and applying it to the unit assembly drawing that we have here. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And you may have seen it, it's flashing some mark numbers starting to pop up as it's doing that data analysis. So
Yep.
We'll get into the detail of what that is doing as well.
Right. Okay, so these right here, like what Bill just mentioned, are called mark numbers. Mark numbers are very unique to every part that creates the unit, right? And it's very unique to them. So what goes into a mark number, right, is the length or the cut size of your part, or obviously the part first, and then the cut size of your part, the finish of the part, meaning whether it's paint, mill, or allodyne, right,
Yeah.
or some special finish, and also fab template name, right? So if you click here, if you click onto this particular part, this is your BIM model. So right now it's kind of nice, right? At least you don't have this. This is, I would say, about 5 years old, and it's probably one of the coolest recent advancements that we have. It makes our lives a lot easier. So you can kind of see like everything's very visual. You can kind of see if things are colliding or not. Everything needs to stop in place, right? Your sill kind of stops at daylight. It's not hitting the vertical. Everything's again very nice and clean. Granted, very simple unit, but these are the things that we want, right? You can visually just see it, and off the bat, you kind of know that it's good to go. You just have to put a little more work in terms of annotating it correctly.
Yeah.
Right. So again, go back here. Let's put this in wireframe. So every part, so let's click the head. So if you see here on the left side, you have the part number, then you have, this is what we call a fab template name. And what this fab template name derives from is associated with this part. You see how it says invert to invert? So it reads the condition. So it reads invert to invert, right? Left and right. So it knows to use this particular data set. So this data set is also telling me that it's fab n, which is that template n right here. Okay.
Yeah.
So just a quick question. Gabe already taught you a little bit about the Revit family, right?
Yeah.
Did he tell you anything about the Revit insertion point?
He might have showed it to me, but he didn't specifically say what an insertion point was. But he did show me a good amount of stuff.
So it's basically the grid line for Revit. So every family has this little grid line that they had to insert from, and it's the kind of like the fixed point, the work point for our data to come from, right? And that stays true for our taglines as well. So say for instance, this work point for the vertical is actually where the tagline is drawn, right here, right? And it's usually to the center. So let me bring in the Revit family from this way so you can kind of see. So again, this is your So this is the family on the left side, right? So you see how this is there's a little datum point here. We call this a datum point. So this is the Revit insertion point. So this point right here is actually where your tagline gets drawn at. It's all like, think of it as a work point where all the data to come from.
Yeah.
Okay. So what it's telling me, just a quick thing on how the data works is, again, this is your head, this is your fab, template number of your finish, and then your adjustment left and right, right? So this one.
Yeah.
And it's telling me that from where the tagline is drawn, deduct a 30-second from each end. Okay, 0.3125. So this is where your tagline is drawn to, right? This is your head tagline right here. It's drawn to the work point. Again, the work point for the everything that intersects. So if we measure from here to here, you can kind of see that that's the deduction.
That's
Right.
the thing that you saw over there in the table.
Right, this one. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So once that's done, us as project engineers, we look at the unit, we run out the, preview the fabs through this way. So if we preview it, we check all this dimension. This is what we call a fab ticket.
That's the fab ticket. Okay.
That's the fab ticket. Okay. So inside the fab ticket, you're showing how the fabricator, how to fab it, obviously. So you're showing them all the notches and the holes. In this case, it doesn't have any holes. It's just a notch at the ends and then notch in the middle for the what we call mini-mac. And then inside here, it has the mark number, right? HM2-2. So if you go over here, you confirm HM2-2. And then 59 and 15/16 is the length that needs to be cut. 59 and 15/16, and has all these other information on it, like what details to refer to, the job name, what is it used for? This is your fab template name, right? And then what this says elevation, but in this case it's a unit, so it tells you what unit it occurs on and how many to cut. Usually when you preview like this, it's usually just 1-to-1. But when you release the whole job, whole week, if this is a very typical condition, you're gonna have it like, I don't know, 20, 30, X amount of times, right? So this number will increase.
And then
So
you'll notice that the prefixes for the parts, in this case, it's an HM. A lot of those we try to reflect the part that it's actually associated with. So HM would be head member. So, and then SV on the left, that's a split vertical. And the SV1 on the right, it's another split vert, but the 1 and the 2, they're different shapes. So they different part numbers associated with them. So this is an abbreviation so we don't have to list out the entire part number. So when it gets to the fabrication stage, it's easy to process these, to mark what they are, and then easy to visualize those when you grab those parts to put them together as a unit.
For sure. Yeah. I see that.
Yeah. So once that's done, you checked it, like you made your check and you're ready to say the next step would be sending it to your project coordinator, right, for checking. Right. So I'm not going to run it because, just to save some time, just to show you an actual job with some actual units is inside at the job name. And then let's go through here. So inside drafting, Takeoff, that's our team, and then checking. So fab ticket, there's a folder for fab tickets and it's already breaking down by, okay, your weekly release. So in this case, let's just go back to week 3. And then this is entirely up to how you coordinate with your project coordinator, how you want to break it down, right? So in this case, they broke it down by only 4 extra units. So you see how we run PDFs, right? And inside these PDFs, it has your fab tickets. And when you click onto here, right, these mark numbers, the mark numbers are linked. So that's why it's very vital to have the mark numbers, right? So it's very unique. So once you click on here, it brings you to the fab ticket. And then the PC will check it, mark it up. This one's wrong, right? And then finish marking it all up. And then it'll go back to the project engineer. and they will do the update per the check, as you know. So the PC is really just the QC check. And then once they update, they go through the release process to release to the shop under their name. So we make these things called shop work orders. So for the shop to look at and scan their time to when they're doing the actual fabrication. When you release it, and then there's an extra step too. So it goes through our programmer, machine programmer. So you've been in the shop, you've seen the Quadra, right? All
Yeah.
the big machines and stuff like that. So we have
All the big machines.
Yeah, so we have a programmer programming these, every single fab ticket that goes through it. Like these, well, in this case, it doesn't have a notch, but it'll go through, cut the part to the right size, and then it has to siphon through the machine programmer, and then that person is the bridge to the machine, right? And then the machine
Communicates all the
cuts it.
necessary information to make the part to those specifications.
Correct. And it's all utilized through the Takeoff program too. The machine programmer uses Takeoff program to bridge to the software that they use, again, to bridge to the machine. So this Takeoff program doesn't directly go into the machine. It needs to be siphoned through using this to go to the software that they use, which is like CAM Plus, job program, and using all these other files like LDTs, and then that gets imported into the machine, and then it gets machined, right? So for your sake, since you're working in the shop right now, you've seen the unit assembly side of it, right?
Yeah.
So you haven't seen the fabrication side. So what I like to explain to them is usually the shop breaks into two pieces, and then the fabrication side breaks into two as well. Oh, actually, just unit assembly side and then the fabrication side, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. Do you want to cover anything else, Bill? Like, am I missing anything?
So that's the overview of how do we take the information from the Revit model, run it through our different programs. In this case, Eric showed you that we work in Revit, we work in AutoCAD, and then we also work in the Takeoff program, which is a custom program that is built in-house to be able to create all of the data that we tie in. So all of that data is stored in the database for each job. So when you get things that are unique to your job, we have the ability to make them so that they affect only the things on that job.
Yeah.
If we have things that we want to have as the more global standards, all of that data gets put onto the server, and then we start by pulling from that, make adjustments as necessary to the job specific part of it, and then that combines using the Revit model as the base for where did the tags come from, converting those into that CAD drawing, and then having the Takeoff program not only being able to read those, but converting it into that 3D model of the actual unit. So that's from the unit standpoint. We also have what's called the field use parts, which are the parts that are not part of the actual unit. Sill tracks, head trims, extended covers, those things that have to be installed in the field. They can't be put together in the shop. Basically, there's limitations. Sometimes you have a shop drawing detail that has a deep extended cover on it. Well, for packaging purposes, that may not be practical to install in the shop. That might be part of the field installation instead. So that's going to be part of that field use package. But as we're working our way through this data, we're going to continue to go back to the shop drawings and use those for reference.
Yeah.
And create some feedback loops there too. Our shop drawings are set up so that we have the ability to write on them and mark them up. We use the Bluebeam Studio sessions in order to be able to use the drawings just as if it was a paper copy and you had it at your desk. You can write on it. However, the benefit of doing it in a studio session is that anyone can see those markups and you can use those for feedback. So let's say you're going through the process and you see that there's a detail bubble that's called out as 1 on 502, but when you investigate that, you realize that that's a typo and it should have been 2 on 501.
Yeah.
We can actually mark that up on the review set, and it can go for updates at a later time. So we use the Bluebeam as one of the programs that we're using as well for working in the PDFs. And one of the great features that Eric pointed out to you is we have the ability to link our Fabs. So it's a very streamlined process to be able to open a unit assembly drawing and then click through to each part. And it's very fast to be able to see exactly which part is in each portion of the unit and be able to identify it, check it, make sure that it's correct. And then at the end, we put all that stuff together as the releases to the shop. There's also associated data with that. We have optimizations so that it basically decides how the parts are going to run through the machines so that they get cut in such a way so that there's minimal drop or waste to our parts. We determine what stock link sizes are best to even order beforehand. So that's part of the material takeoff process that Eric alluded to earlier as well. So it's really all tied into being able to work in that database type of environment, to be able to sort through all of those things and pull the different pieces of information depending on what our use is. We're able to do reports as well. So when it gets to the shop floor, there's a glass by pallet report, so that if you're going to be working on pallet number 52 on week 4, day 3, then you know what glass you need to take right to the assembly line so that you don't have to figure that out. It's on that report.
Exactly.
That glass is on the line. It's just the glass you need for that particular week of units. And there's no waste in opening a bunch of cases up to try to find it. Eric's opening up some of the other reports that we create too. So we have the metal takeoff report. It basically gives you the counts and the stock length sizes and the finishes for all the parts and pieces in the project. And then we do have a similar report that shows what's happening with all the glass as well.
Let me pull that up. Try to pull up the metal takeoff review.
So you see some of the other programs that we work in are Excel. We also, we need to communicate a lot. So we work in the Bluebeam studio session, but we also use Zoom like we're doing now. So we use Zoom chat to check in with each other. We also will send emails. We also keep Trello boards for each project. So if there's things that we want to review, we might put that information on the Trello boards to be able to either have that discussion with the project manager. Let's say there's a question that comes up, we need some clarification. We'll put that on the board for review. We also have different stages that we do our work in. So the initial setup stage will have a bunch of the data established. We want to give that to the team that's doing the material takeoffs, the glass and metal takeoff. So we'll have a handoff and we'll give them that information based on what we're seeing on the Trello board. So we hand it off from phase to phase so that we convey what have we done so far and what state is the data in when you're taking it over to do your part.
So what we have here is just to briefly cover material takeoff since we have a little bit of time. Again, for metal takeoff, right, we don't really care a whole lot about fabrication. We try, but we just care about the length of it. And the reason why we care about the length of it is you want to get the general scope of how the building looks like in terms of like from unit to unit, how tall are the verticals, right?
Yeah.
This will give you an idea of the stock length size to order during material takeoffs. Stock length size meaning, like you order from the vendor, they just ship it to you at that size that you ordered from. So in this case, you have, say, these three of the same parts. You have 3 different stock length sizes, meaning for the job, it probably varies that much. So in order to have a better yield and less waste, we had to break it down into 3 different stock length sizes. And it's pretty nice to show you, like, what is the drop, like the percentage, like how much are you really losing in terms of cost. So this is the good indicator, like, okay, we need to flag it and, kind of play around with the numbers, or play around with, like, this drop needs to go over here.
Bring the cost down. Yeah.
Yeah, just to bring the cost down. And sometimes, you might spend too long, and then you might not get the cost down way too much. Like this one's 87%. I'm sure they probably beat it down to get to that point. So it's like, okay, it's probably not worth it to continue on, right? So
Yeah.
So this is kind of like your yield, right, to show you how much waste. And then from here, it also generates the metal order, which goes to Heather, right, on purchasing. So they can purchase the PM goes to purchasing, and then they can purchase the material. And then Bill covered it briefly about the field use items. So if you take a look at our unit key sheet, the unit assembly drawing has all the mark numbers, right? So
Yeah.
inside a field use package, meaning all the parts that goes to the field and they get installed, either during the time of unit installation or beforehand for sure. This is an elevation sheet, right? And in that, it has the unit, the mark numbers as well. So SR stands for sill runner. So basically your sill track, right? So these need to be in the field and set down on the ground first before any unit comes and sit on top of it. So give you an idea. So these guys right here. There's many names for it. They call it starter track as well, because it starts the process. Right. So think of it as inside this elevation key sheet, the field use, you have a bunch of like little units. It's just showing the elevation, but it has all the mark numbers for the field use items.
Yeah.
So if the job is not unitized, right, meaning it's not assembled in the shop, it all goes to the field to assemble in the field, call it a stick wall job. You'll see the whole building is just, all we do is release it with set of elevation key sheet with all these mark numbers in there. So think of it as your verticals keep going back like this, each one, and then just go from there. So all kind of goes back to having mark numbers, and it's kind of linked, fabrication, stuff like that.
So our approach is when we're working with data, we try to keep things as standard as possible, but we do a lot of custom work as well. And so we need to have the ability to be able to create standard logic, have some standard data set up, but we need to be able to modify it to meet the job specific conditions. And then we even have changes that occur as we're doing our processes. So we have other processes in place that handle when something changes after we've gone so far with doing Fabs, for example. It has to run through a process in order for us to know, well, what changed and what do we need to do in order to release the updated thing to the project manager.
For sure.
So the engineering department, the team before us, after the initial sales Revit model goes into the drafting department, the drafting division creates the shop drawings, and then the Takeoff division, which is what Eric and I are involved in, we create the data and the fab tickets and do all the releases to the shop. We also support the field team, so as whenever necessary, we'll coordinate with them, and then we'll always be available to answer any questions. So we'll sometimes get calls from the shop floor. They may have something that for us it made sense at the time, but it may not be clear to the guy that doesn't have the background on the project yet. And he's like, what is this thing doing in this condition? So they'll call and ask us to just help clarify those types of things that just need a little extra explanations.
For sure, yeah.
And that's the thing that we want, right? We want that communication from the field, from the shop into us, and building that relation with them, so we can, it's a collaborative effort, right? So it's not just that, we got to work up as well. So, you know, we're struggling with communicating with drafting sometimes, because, you know, we're both, you know, like pretty high paced jobs or anything like that.
Yeah.
So as we forget to give feedback, or, you know, we forget something, but, you know, it's just really taking the time to having the bigger picture and say, you know, feedback is good. It's not pointing any fingers or anything like that. Don't take it the wrong way. You know, mistakes are there for people to learn. And, you know, it's not to, you know, point fingers and say, hey, you did it wrong. You know, it's just for you to learn, for everyone, not just you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So, Cheyenne, any questions so far about, I mean, really, it's just the initial overview of what our process looks like. As you can probably tell by some of the things we showed you, we go into incredible depth of detail.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah.
So no particular questions or anything like that? Anything you noticed working in the shop, and then like that it kind of made sense after hearing this quick presentation? Or
Yeah. I just want to say that it is helpful to see like where all the data comes from. If you see, like, for example, like if I'm observing one of the teams on the shop floor that are making a unit, for example, then they're looking at the drawing. It said that drawing came from somewhere, was created, and then it came there. It didn't just magically pop up. So
right.
It definitely helps understand everything more at a deeper level to see where it came from, and in that process before, what was the process before that. So just fitting all the puzzle pieces together, so to say.
Yeah, and that's what we want for not just you, everyone, and people who even worked there for, you know, for a month or 2 months. You know, like it's kind of hard, even for me sometimes it's hard to connect the dots. Again, going back to the theme, right? Connecting the dots is really hard. But if you can do it, if you can connect the dots, it makes, you know, your life a lot easier, because you're just understanding the whole process, right?
100%.
You're understanding what affects the downstream. You're understanding why the upstream gave you this product and what might have went wrong, and therefore it's like it's easier for you to do your job. So it's very important if you can just connect everything together.
So Eric, let me do a share screen on my side for a minute. Yeah. And then Cheyenne, I'm going to show you some areas for additional resources. Let me do
Sounds good.
Screen share. So have you been introduced to the portal and the wiki?
Yeah, I've seen the portal on the wiki. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're on the portal, over in the engineering tab here, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a training. And so inside of the training, there's a lot of documentation of various aspects of the engineering department. So there's small individual trainings. A lot of these are little videos about very specific things, and they're broken up into containers. So this one is Revit training, for example. And then as you scroll down, there's BIM 360. There's AutoCAD training. There's Jumpstart processes. As you go over here, we have a list of classroom training. So once a week, we do each of the 3 groups, drafting, Takeoff, and PMs have a 1-hour training class each week. Then when you scroll down below that, those training sessions are set up here in the classroom training content. So a lot of these are classes that we've put together over the past few months that are very similar to this discussion that Eric and I just had with you, where we're taking a process and dissecting it into an overview of what happens at the certain stages. So these run an hour apiece, but there's individual lessons for each of the different stages. Now they're in alphabetical order, so they're not like if you wanted to see the overview of a whole department's process, we'd probably have to help you sort through what order they were in. But one of the ways that you can see that, for example, is like in the Takeoff training, we actually set these up very specifically so that like our first 10 or 11 classes are in the order that these things happen as part of the Takeoff process.
I see. Okay.
So the similar thing for, this is the drafting department's version. So these are kind of the order. Now, I don't know how strict they are. Ours are pretty strict up to this point. And then once we finish next week's, this week's class, we'll start doing things a little bit more as the topics come up. May not be in exact order anymore because we're covering most of the structure of the Takeoff part will actually be incorporated through all of these sessions.
For sure.
So these mostly are links to so like this one, let's say we did the, what was the one that,
Carlos one?
yeah, let's see. Carlos did one a couple
Metal
weeks ago
checking.
for checking metal. So in the
Yeah, so-
classroom training, metal takeoff checking. So when you select, when you just click on that, it just opens up that that hour-long session of the classroom. So it just goes through his whole process of what he produced for teaching that class.
Yeah.
So just some additional resources if there's something that you want to explore in a little bit more depth on your own as well. Okay, so any additional questions for us about the process or how do we develop the Fabs process or anything like that?
I don't have any more additional questions, but all that information was definitely really helpful. Like the first training I did on Monday, this was just another step in the training, just an overview of the next step in the process, the next piece in the puzzle, so to say. So all this information was very helpful for me. Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good.
Yeah, thank you guys a lot for the training. I have a 2 o'clock Kaizen I got to switch over to, but
No
I
problem.
was here for most of it. It was good. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
See ya.
David.
All right,
Have a
take
good
care.
one.
Nice
All right.
meeting you, Cheyenne.
Good job.
Thank
Nice
you.
meeting you.
All
See you,
right,
Bill.
take care.